The Latter-day Disciples team is pleased to announce our fall conference, Awake and Ascend the Mountain of the Lord. This virtual event will be held on November 3rd and 4th. The theme of our event is exploring the temple as a pattern for our mortal journeys and eternal ascension. We are excited to look at ancient and modern temple types and their patterns to more deeply understand the significance of temple worship and the application of temple living in our mortal journeys. In addition to this, we will be sharing an exciting announcement during the Saturday sessions you won't want to miss. Our speakers include Kevin Ball, Valerie Hudson, Nicole Hansen, Margaret Barker, Rob Kay, Corey Jensen, Cameron Mayer, and Farrell Pickering. We hope that you can join us. Please go to latterdaydisciples.com/events to register now. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Latter-day Disciples podcast. I'm excited to be joined today by Jason Mow. Jason served a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and afterwards joined the United States Army and served as a paratrooper. He advanced through the ranks to the position of team sergeant for the Army's Elite Special Reactions Team. He has experience in training in joint counter narcotics operations, protective services, counterterrorism, weapons and tactics training, and deployments to hostile areas. After the Army, Jason began work as a civilian police officer, and he has worked as a patrol officer, gang detective, narcotics detective, street crimes detective, and spent several years on the SWAT team as an operator and instructor. He is a certified police instructor in firearms, defensive tactics, tactical driving, and patrol rifle operations. Jason has twice been awarded the Law Enforcement Medal of Honor for gallant bravery in the line of duty and was recognized as the Community Services Officer of the Year for his department. In addition to the military and police training, he has a bachelor's degree in education from Northern Arizona University and has graduated from the Arizona Law Enforcement Academy, the U.S. State Department International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Program, and the United States Army Military Police Academy. He is also post-certified police instructor. In 2006, Jason took time off from his law enforcement career and worked as a civilian contractor for the U.S. government in Afghanistan. He worked at the National Police Academy in Herat as a lead instructor. Jason has also worked as the personal mentor for law enforcement operations to several regional Afghan government officials. He embedded with the U.S. Army and traveled with small specialized teams of soldiers to remote locations throughout Afghanistan. It was in Afghanistan that the first ideas of what would become the War Chapter series began to form. After a rocket attack on his base in Herat, he turned to the scriptures and found comfort in reading about the experiences of Captain Moroni. He wrote these scenes as they played out in his mind all throughout his time there. Jason volunteers his time and skills doing humanitarian work, conducting personal recovery operations, medical aid, and security in response to natural disasters around the world. He has deployed to assist during Hurricane Katrina and the earthquake in Haiti. Jason, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Appreciate you giving me some time to talk, and this is cool.
Yes, absolutely. I'm excited to share your story. You have so much experience. You are a warrior, you're a soldier, and that has manifested throughout your life. And it's helped you to create a larger ideology that you've built your life around. And I'm really excited to talk about that today. So can we take a step back and kind of listening to that biography, where do you feel like things really started to mesh for you in terms of defining your own personal ethic for life and approaching the gospel and living the gospel from that perspective as well?
Well, you would think, being a third generation East Mesa Mormon boy, that would have been during my mission. But I didn't really start to develop this until I was in the military. I got home off of my mission. I went to Spokane, Washington on my mission, which was for me a foreign mission because I grew up in Phoenix, and then they send me to northern Idaho and northern Washington and parts of Canada right up there, and it was completely different. I had no idea that a toilet could freeze because I had never experienced that before. But when I got home off my mission, I had turned down scholarships, athletic scholarships, to go on my mission. This was back in the late 80s, early 90s, when colleges really didn't hold on to scholarships. You either went to college or you went on your mission. So I turned those down, and I came from a broken home full of abuse and addiction, and really was just, could have been one of the statistics, but I chose to not be that person. And and I got home off my mission, and I really didn't have anything going for me. And being from East Mesa in the late '80s, um, if you're 6 months home off of your mission and you're not on the way to the BYU or engaged to get married, there was something wrong with you, and there wasn't anything wrong with me. I just didn't want to go to college, and I wasn't ready to get married. I had experienced a little bit of life, a little bit of adventure when I was on my mission, and I said, "There's this great big world out there, and I want to see what there is. I want to meet new people, travel to exotic locations, and I want to blow a lot of really cool stuff up." And I was just kind of treading water. I was working with my buddy as a plumber, just kind of making money and spending money and not really going anywhere. And then fortunately, one day I woke up and this really pretty lady on CNN said that we had just invaded, or we had just gone to war against Iraq, against Saddam Hussein. He invaded Kuwait, and they were building this coalition. And I saw the troops marching, and I saw planes flying and the music, and I was like, oh, that looks like fun. I want to be a part of that. And so I joined the Army, and I became a paratrooper. And I said, you know what? I am volunteering to die for the Constitution. I've never really even read it. And so I said, if I'm willing to risk my life for this idea of a representative republic, to serve, and to be, a warrior for God and a warrior for the people of this country, then I should probably know what it's about. And so I started studying the Constitution, and that made me want to read other books. And so I started reading other books, history books, science books, politics, medicine, biographies, anything I could get my hand on that I thought was interesting. And I started to realize that I don't know anything. I don't. And there's so much information out there. And so I just started to develop this love of my country and the love of the gospel, and how it just seamlessly, in my perspective, intermixes and intertwines. And being good at a soldier makes me better as a Christian, and being good as a Christian makes me better as a soldier. And how it just worked for me, and I found a way to make it work. And I loved being a soldier. I loved serving. I loved jumping out of airplanes and running through the bushes, and just being that guy. And I ended up as the team sergeant for the Army's version of a SWAT team. And I got to do some really, really fun stuff. That wasn't fun enough. And so I decided to leave the military. I got married. I found a pretty little soldier that thought that I was the coolest thing ever. And we got married. We had a couple of kids, and it got to the point where I had to make a decision to make the military my career or to move on to other things. And so I decided to leave, and I became long story short, I became a Chandler police officer, which is a suburb here of Phoenix. And I was on their SWAT team, and I worked at the academy. I taught police officers how to shoot and how to fight and how to drive, and all the not the report writing or anything like that, or the courtroom procedures, all the really fun stuff. And I was a narcotics detective for a while, and I got to do some, some of your listeners may be familiar with the Mesa Temple. Before they did the renovations, there was a big visitor center at the Mesa Temple, and right inside, as you walk in the front doors, was this 12-foot high Christus, all white marble statue of Christ that they would light up, and you could see as you're driving by from across the street. And right across the street from the temple, right across the main street right there, is a park called Pioneer Park. And before they did the renovations, that was kind of a shady place. And as a narcotics detective, I used to stand in Pioneer Park and sell drugs while I'm looking at the statue of Christ the whole time, going, I'm sorry, this is for a good cause, it really is. And I just had some amazing adventures, and that wasn't good enough for me. And so the federal government came to me, the State Department came to me, and they said, hey, you've got this amazing tactical military experience, all this tactical law enforcement experience. How about if we give you a couple of buckets of money and you come to Afghanistan and deal with the Taliban as a civilian? And I said, whoa, wait a minute. This is an option that I have. I can do all the really fun stuff in the military, but I don't have to salute or shave or polish my boots. And you're going to pay me a ton of money? Absolutely. And so I went to Afghanistan, and I spent 13 months in Afghanistan working as a military contractor. And I got to do some really amazing stuff, some counter narcotic stuff, counter human trafficking, counter weapons. I was a bodyguard for a while. I worked at the National Police Academy in Herat, Afghanistan, where I taught Afghan soldiers how to be cops, which was the psychological equivalent of herding cats. It was rough. It was really rough. But the culmination of that was that I ended up becoming the mentor and personal advisor to all the tribal elders and chiefs of police in the entire western region of Afghanistan. And the military would take me, and I'd go and I'd live. They'd drop me off and I'd live and work with the Afghan people in their village, just doing all kinds of crazy things. And that wasn't crazy enough for me. So after about 13 months, I got recruited to become a Phoenix police officer. And so I came back home and ended up working in an area called South Phoenix, which, if anybody knows the Phoenix area, that's the place to be if you want to be a cop. That's one of the last places on earth where you can catch real bad guys. And I worked in South Phoenix for about 9-10 years, and it was like an episode of Live PD every night. There were car chases and helicopter rides and dog bites and donut runs, and we were just living the dream. And the whole time I'm just learning more about government. I'm learning more about myself, about my commitment to God, and I helped start the Tea Party here in Arizona. I got involved in that really early on. I got involved in politics. I've helped get some people elected, and so it's just some solid, good people that understood the Constitution and what it really meant to be a constitutionalist. And I was just having the time of my life. But then I ended up getting wounded as a Phoenix cop. I didn't know if you wanted to get into that or if you wanted to take the conversation a different place. Or
No, this is great. Go ahead and let's talk about that.
Okay. So I'm working as a patrol officer in South Phoenix, and I had just finished my shift, my full 10-hour shift. And I caught all my bad guys and done all my paperwork, and I'm just about to go home, and I'm literally driving my car into the precinct, and I'm just about ready to push on our computers in the cars. There's this magic button, and if we push that button, it tells everybody out there in Copland that we're done. We're going home. We're done catching bad guys. And I'm just about to push that button so that I can pull into the precinct and unload my car when some of the third shift officers, this is like midnight too, some of the third shift officers that are just down the street say that they're chasing a guy and they need to get him to stop, and he's not stopping for us. Well, I have a choice at this point. I can hit that magic red button and I can go home. Nobody's going to care. No one's going to say anything. I've already met my contractual obligation for my job. Or I can turn my patrol car around and get involved in this chase. Well, anybody that knows me knows that's not really an option for me. This is what I do, right? I hunt armed men. This is my job. So I turn my patrol car around instead of going home and get involved in this chase. And well, it turns into a foot pursuit, and I'm running after this guy through the dark back alleys of South Phoenix. And as I'm running along, I feel this tremendous pain in the back of my leg where my hamstring meets my tailbone. And I said to myself, you know what, if I'm going to have a pulled hamstring muscle in the morning from chasing this guy, he's going to have my handcuffs on him when he goes to jail. He's going to know that I'm the one that caught him, right? And so that made me want to run after him even harder. And the harder I ran, the more it hurt. And the more it hurt, the more I wanted to catch this guy. And it got to the point where I was basically just gumbying my leg behind me, just trying to keep him in view. And sorry, my phone's going off there. It figures everybody tries to call me right now. Well, we're running along, and I'm just trying to keep him in view so I can tell the other officers where he's at, because we're about 500 officers below minimum at that point. And so I'm riding by myself, and there's not enough officers. And so I'm on my radio. And so the helicopter shows up, and there's some more patrol cars coming, and he realizes he's not going to get away. And so this guy, being a career criminal, does what career criminals do. He turns around, he squares up on me like a boxer. Well, I'm moving just as fast as I can. So I tackle him like a linebacker, and we go down in the dirt, and we just start, pummeling each other, just having a beat down of a fight. Well, I finally get my handcuffs on him, and I roll him over in the dirt, and I stand up over the top of him like WWE superstar wrestler Randy Macho Man Savage, right? I go, "Where are you going, Billy?" I'll tell you, you're going nowhere. And that's when it felt like I had just been shot. This amazing white hot pain went shooting up my spine and down to both my legs, and it hurt so bad that it sucked the air out of my lungs. And I couldn't process what was happening. I couldn't figure out why my body wouldn't move, why my legs didn't work. I just knew that it hurt and I couldn't move. So my first thought was, well, I've just been shot. And so I tried to get down, because 30 years of training, that's what you do. If people are shooting at you, you get down, right? But I can't move. I can't make my legs do anything. And I can't figure out what's happening because of the pain is so bad. So I start checking and there's no holes in my body. So my next question was, did I just tase myself? And so I looked down at my taser and it's still intact and nothing's making sense. Well, the other officers, he tried to get my gun and he ripped my radio off of my lapel, so they couldn't really figure out where we were. Well, the other officers finally figured out where they were, and they show up, and there's 6 or 8 uniforms there. And then the sergeant walks up and he sees that I'm in pain. And he goes, "What's going on?" And I go, the tears are coming out of my eyes. And I said, "Well, it's kind of dusty and it's the allergy season right now, and I should probably go to the hospital." So I end up driving myself to the hospital. Now, the reason I did that is because everybody knows that cops and firemen have like a love-hate relationship, right? I know these wing nuts, and I'm not getting locked in an ambulance with them. It's not going to happen. So I drive myself to the hospital. Long story short, the doctor comes in, and they had done an MRI and other tests and stuff like that. And on in the exam room, they got that whiteboard with the light that they put the X-ray page on, and you can see it, right? So he walks in, he puts this film up, and he turns it on, and here's my pelvis, and my hips go down like this, and right in the middle of both my legs are these big white splotches that look like this. Now, I've broken enough bones and been in enough ERs to know that that's not right. I've seen enough X-rays, and I said, "Ooh, doc, what is that?" And you know how when doctors they like lower their register when they have to say like serious things, right? So he lowers his voice and he leans in and he goes, "I cannot explain medically what I'm looking at right now. There is no explanation that I, as a physician, can give for what I'm looking at right now between you and the X-rays here. But what you have done is you have completely detached both of your hamstring muscles from your pelvis bone. You have ripped them completely off the bone." Right? And so I go, "Ooh, that looks like that hurts." And he goes, "Yeah. Yeah." He goes, "I don't even know how you walked in here." He goes, "I cannot explain medically how you're even sitting here." He goes, "Either you have an extremely high tolerance for pain or you're too dumb to know it hurts. Either way, you need to lie down." And so I did. And it took me 3 years to get back up. I crippled myself. I'd lost the ability to walk. So my first phone call was to my wife. 23 years, 2 kids. She divorces me right there, drops me like a hot rock. So a lot of really, really horrible things happened to me in a very short amount of time. And I wish that I could go into more detail, but I actually had to sign a non-disclosure agreement with the insurance company, with the city, and with Workman's Comp. I will let you use your imagination. Everything's public record. If anybody wants to know, it's out there. But in the end, after a very short period of time, I was homeless, unemployable, divorced, crippled, and financially ruined all at the same time. And I was left to die by everybody and everything that I ever loved, trusted, or counted on. So that's where I became who I am. That's the beginning of the end, or the end of the beginning, however you want to start it. But it was at that point I had to make a choice. I'm a problem solver. This is what I do. When you call for a SWAT team, there's nobody else coming. I have to solve the problem. You call for paratroopers, there's nobody else coming. I have to solve the problem, right? When everything is taken away from you, when you have nothing left and you have literally everything is gone and you have been burned to the carbon, you're left with 2 choices. It's victory or death. And both of those arguments made powerful, powerful conversations as I laid literally in a crock pot of my own emotional filth, unable to move for months and months at a time. They had to they could only do one surgery at a time because it takes a year to recover for reattaching the hamstring. And I had to hold completely motionless because scar tissue was the only thing that was holding my hamstring onto my pelvis bone. And if I moved, it would all rip off and I'd have to do it all over again. So as all of that is happening to me, a divorce, losing my money, not even knowing if I was going to walk again, being homeless, I had to hold completely still. So all of this was happening to me and there's nothing I could do about it. And then those intrusive thoughts come in about, well, what's the point? And I'm not too proud to say that those thoughts weren't winning the argument. And there were times when I considered suicide. And I can tell you now, having clarity of hindsight, that the only reason I didn't put a bullet in my mouth is because I knew that my mom was going to be the first one to find me. And I couldn't do that to her. I had been a cop long enough and I'd seen enough suicides to know what that looks like and what the aftermath is for other people. And you don't stop the pain, you just transfer it to somebody else. And I couldn't do that to her. And so I said, well, I'm going to have to choose victory then. And that meant that I had to surrender everything to God. I had to give everything to him. And so to do that, my first act of sedition, I'm burning right through this real quick, I'm sorry. My first act of sedition against the darkness was on a little piece of paper, was to write this mantra. And it said, goals for the day: wake up, survive, go to bed. And that's all I allowed myself to do. And I stuck it to the bookcase next to where I was laying because I could only look up, look right, and look left, and that was it. And whenever I started feeling frustrated or overwhelmed, or, oh, she's taking everything, the house, my dog, it's all gone. Am I ever going to have a relationship with my children again? And I would just bubble up, and I couldn't move. I just had to lay there and just feel this burning sensation. Whenever that would happen, I would say, you know what, Heavenly Father, I'm going to have to stop saying that I'm a Christian, and I'm going to have to start acting like a Christian, which means that if there is a God in heaven, then he is perfect. And if he is a perfect, immortal, loving, caring, all loving human being, then there is a plan, and that plan is perfect. And if there is a perfect plan written by a perfect God, then what I'm going through right now is part of it, and I have to trust him. And so for the first time in my entire life, I actually placed my trust in my Heavenly Father. And I said, there's nothing I can do about my divorce. I can't even get up. So I'm giving all that pain to you. What I'm going to do, Heavenly Father, is I'm going to wake up, I'm going to survive, I'm going to go to bed. And I marked my time by my meals. I would do whatever I had to do to keep breathing until lunch. And then I would take a break and I would eat my lunch. And I would say, okay, I'm going to eat my lunch. Once lunch was done and I had to lay back down and just simmer in my crock pot of emotional filth, I did whatever I had to do to make it till dinner. And I just gave all the rest of the pain to him. And I said, you know what, Heavenly Father, I don't know if I'm ever going to walk again. You do. I don't. I don't know. I'm trusting you. I'm going to give that pain to you. I'm just going to focus on breathing, and I'm just going to survive. And I did that for months and months and months until I could sit up. And then it was wake up, sit up, survive, and go to bed. And people started seeing this happening to me. And they saw that I was fighting through this and I was recovering and I was building my life again over these years, 3 to 5 years of physical therapy, of recovery, of divorce proceedings, of, meetings at going to court, all of the things that I was doing absolutely alone. And they saw that I was doing that. And they said, how in the world, Mr. Jason, could you do that? Because any one of those would have been enough to make a normal person check out. A divorce, bankruptcy, losing your ability to walk, any one of those, normal person, I'm done, right? Mm-hmm. You had all of that at the same time. And I said, well, it's just my warrior way. It's my warrior ethos. This is who I am. I'm a warrior, and warriors do not quit. And they said, well, that's fascinating. None of us have your perspective because we've not experienced what you've experienced in your life. What does that mean? And so I ended up creating what I call the Warrior Ethos, which is this 15 verses of true heroic behavior. And I started to just talk to people about my Warrior Ethos. They'd say, that's amazing. Could you come to my house and explain that to my children? And so I would crutch or limp my way into their house, and I would just have a conversation with them about what it means to be a warrior, what it means to especially in these latter days. What does that mean? Why am I here? Why at this moment in time? Why am I experiencing what I am experiencing? And how that all relates back to this warrior attitude, this warrior mentality. And they would say, well, that's amazing. Would you come back and say that to our whole stake? So, okay, and before you know it, I'm doing FSYs and I'm guest lecturing at BYU, Idaho, and they're flying me out to New England to do a 4-state, not stake, but state-wide youth conference. And I'm just a cop. I just kick in doors for a living. I don't know. And then I start writing books. I write the historical fiction about Captain Moroni, the war chapters, and then I write my autobiography, and this whole other side of life just unfolds in front of me. And now that I'm not past it, but I'm through that part of my life experience, I'm healthier, I'm happier, I'm richer. I have a bigger family because I found love again. I've got 3 more children and 2 more grandbabies now. Everything that the Lord has blessed me tenfold, because I refused to quit. And I refused to succumb to the darkness. And I made a conscious decision to be the person that he sent me down here to be.
Yeah. I love it. I love it so much. And I think that your story is a fantastic illustration of this cycle that we know is a true pattern of creation, fall, and atonement. Creation, fall, and atonement, right? Like that's the temple pattern. That's the hero's journey. You read it in literature. It's why movies and books resonate with humanity, is because this is an eternally true thing. And your life is such a great illustration of it. You had this creation, you were having success, you were famous in your field to the point that the State Department knew who you were. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it was what it was.
It depends on who's president at the time,
Definitely. And then you have this fall where there's tragedy and there's hardship and there's loss and there's pain and death. There's a potential for death, right?
Yes.
Adam and Eve, they had this fall. They were in a state of glory. They were in a terrestrial sphere where they could converse with God. And then they fell and they came here, and here sucks. We all know that. And this is the thing that I love the most about your story. You didn't give up. You gave over.
Yes.
You gave over to God. And that's the atonement.
Yep.
That's where you rise again. That's the phoenix from the ashes, is when you turn to Christ. I think that's so awesome. Well, you hit on exactly where I want to take this, which is talking about, the focus of our podcast is that we live in the last days. And whether or not we're warriors yet, there's going to be war.
Yes.
There already is. There already is spiritual warfare. And sooner rather than later, I think there's going to be physical warfare. And we can't afford to waste this time and to not become warriors right now.
Right.
So let's get into it. Warrior ethos. What do we have to do physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally to become able to withstand what's coming?
Don't be afraid of the question if you're going to, or the answer if you're going to ask the question.
I'm ready. Let's do it.
The first thing you need to do is remember that you don't need to be big and strong and carry a gun to be a warrior. It's about who you are as a person. It's about your commitment to excellence. It's about your commitment to God, to your family, to your country. It's about your duty, and understanding duty is it's actually one of the verses in the Warrior's Ethos is, I do my duty. And when I explain this, when I go to talk to people, corporations or sports teams or schools or whatever, I explain to them, what is your duty? And I say, well, duty is an old Latin term, and it means a debt is to be paid or a debt is owed. So who do we owe a debt to, right? You need to figure that out, and when I was younger, I was having a hard time figuring out this concept of duty. And somebody gave me a book written by a guy named Ezra Taft Benson. I don't know if your viewers know who that is or not, but it's kind of an important, kind of an important guy, both in the church and in national and international politics. A lot of people don't know that he sat on the cabinet, the presidential cabinet for Eisenhower, and actually went to Europe and stood toe to toe against the Russians as we were rebuilding Europe during the Marshall Plan. He was a magnificent person. spiritually and politically. And he wrote a book called God, Family, and Country, Our Three Great Loyalties. And in that book, it outlined for me where my loyalties were to my God, my family, and my country. And once I had that, then my focus could be on my duty. My duties to my God, my family, and my country. And anything else other than that is just icing on the cake. But everything that I do is to repay that debt to my God, to my family, and my country. It's easy to say that. It's a lot harder to do it. And that's the difference. You talked about giving up as versus giving in. Satan wants you to give up. He wants you to meet minimum standards. He wants you to do, that was his plan, that you don't have to do anything. And so he still wants that today, where you don't really do anything. Giving in sounds harder, but it's actually easier. It's just having the will to do it. Giving up, you still have your problems. Just because I give up doesn't mean I'm not going to get divorced anymore. Just because I give up doesn't mean I can walk again, right? It's actually harder to give up than it is to give in, because giving in now gives you focus, it gives you determination, it gives you drive, it gives you a perspective, a different perspective when you're facing these challenges, whether they're emotional, physical, spiritual, or psychological challenges. You have focus now, you have determination, you have a reason and an understanding of why you're going through what you're going through. This is a refining process that we're experiencing right now. We are going through the heat, pressure, and time of this refining process because God wants us to be a pure people. He needs a pure people on this earth when he comes back to govern as God of this earth. He needs that pure, refined people. And there's only one way to go through the refining process. That's heat, pressure, and time. If you think about the refining fire and what the master craftsman does with a raw hunk of ore, he sticks that into a fire and he leaves it there till it's glowing red hot. Then he pulls it out and he bangs on it with a hammer. And he does this over and over again because he is trying to remove the impurities in that raw ore. That's the only way to get the impurities out of that raw ore is heat, pressure, and time. And once he's done this and has removed all the impurities, then he can take this raw ore and hone it and shape it and give it a razor's edge. And now he has a weapon. And he knows that if he leaves any impurities in that ore, that's a weakness that can be exploited. And so he does that to create pure steel. We're going through the refining process right now, whatever it is, whether it's, again, emotional, physical, spiritual, or psychological refinement, because God is trying to remove those impurities in us, giving us the opportunity to experience this, to drive our roots deep down in the earth. So when the winds and the rains come, we don't topple over like a weak tree. And once you have that perspective, then you look at everything like, oh, I'm just being made better. This isn't bad, right? It's okay to hurt. It's just not okay to quit. Mm-hmm. I hurt. I still hurt today. Pain is an old friend and it will be for the rest of my life. But what that does is it reminds me that I'm worth it, that this is a refining process, and whatever's in front of me now is there for a reason. That obstacle is not a barrier, it's an opportunity to become bigger, faster, and stronger. And it's only through this refining process that I can get there. So whatever is ahead of us, whatever we're going to face, are we going to face war? Probably. Are we going to face famines? I mean, if anybody's read any scriptures, we know that there's going to be some calamities, right? This is part of our mantra as Latter-day Saints. That's why we have food storage. That's why we have plans in place. That's why we do what we do, is because we're anticipating problems coming up and we want to be ahead of it. Whatever's coming our way is to make us better. And we have to trust the process.
Right.
And once you trust the process and you understand the process and that it's there to make you bigger, faster, and stronger and draw you closer to Christ, when you have that new perspective, you can face anything.
Changes everything. There's purpose to the pain. Yeah. There's purpose to the pain, right? I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think refining actually happens unless you give in. If you give up, the refining process is halted. Because the Lord is the refiner.
Yes.
And so if you're not inviting him into that place of pain and trial and tribulation, then you're just sitting in the pain. It's not making you better. Yes.
Do not be afraid of the pain. The pain is a gift from God. It was pain that redeemed you in the Garden of Gethsemane. there was so much pain that he bled from every pore. And modern medical science tells us that if a human is bleeding from their pores because of the pain, they're probably going to die or pass out. But he had to feel every ounce of pain. He had to be lucid and conscious enough to accept voluntarily to feel that. And so as his physical body is shutting down, the God in him had to keep his heart beating because he had to make that choice. Nobody else could make that for him. An angel couldn't come in and bless him with more health. That it had to be him. It had to be an absolute sacrifice. So he had to feel more pain, had to tell his body to keep functioning, or the human in him would have stopped working. Right? It is a gift from God. You get to experience at a minute level what your Savior went through for you. You know, you get to feel the burn that he felt when he was betrayed. You get to feel the pain and anguish of being crucified minutely. And now you can commune with him because there's only one person in all of creation that understands you. And that's Christ. Because he understands the pain that you went through, because he felt everything that every creature in all of creation has experienced.
Beautiful. I love that so much. Thank you. The pain is a gift. The pain is what redeemed you. Absolutely beautiful. All right. Number 2.
Number 2.
Are we ready? There's 15, yeah. Right? Okay.
The first one is, it just states I'm a warrior. Just states who you are.
Okay.
And we as Latter-day Saints understand this principle a lot better than most because we understand that there was a war in heaven. And that war, so everybody on this earth is a powerful, experienced veteran of combat. Everybody here on earth has earned the title warrior. And we know this because when the prophet gave his first, back in 2018, or 19, when he gave that first youth address, worldwide youth address, and he told the youth it's time to join the Lord's Youth Battalion, right? There's a lot of things that he said in that. We kind of focus on that, but he also said that the youth of today are God's heroes. That we as a generation did something in the war in heaven so profound that an eternal perfect being that can ignite a star considers us his heroes. Do we understand what that means? Has anybody stopped and thought about those words that the prophet said, that we were so profound and so brave and so diligent and so good at our soldierly jobs in this war in heaven that we are God's heroes? And what does that mean? And once you realize that, once you see that, everything changes in your life. When you realize who you really are, then you understand why Satan is trying so hard and pushing so hard down on top of you. Why you should take it personal, because it is personal for Satan, because somebody had to walk him out. And tell me he didn't remember the faces of the people that actually walked him out of heaven. You know, was it you? Was it any one of the kids that I addressed? You know, and so when you feel Satan personally pushing down on you, wear that like a badge of honor. Instead of going, oh, woe is me, here's another problem in my life, you go, yeah, that's how dangerous I am to Satan's plan, that he is personally taking time out to try to mess with me, right? That's what it means to be a warrior, and understanding who you are and who you serve. So the second one is I do my duty. We talked about that one. The next one is I serve a cause greater than myself. We have to find a cause greater than who we are, right? And that cause is preparing this earth for the second coming of Jesus Christ. So what does that mean, right? What does that mean to prepare the earth for the second coming of Jesus Christ? Well, let me give you an example of that. After I recovered and I started getting better, and again, the church came to me and asked me to be a seminary teacher. And so they actually hired me as a seminary teacher here at one of the big high schools in Mesa, Arizona. And I was the only seminary teacher. Now I have no training or experience whatsoever being a seminary teacher. The closest I came was teaching, people how to be a cop. That's the closest I ever came to education. And so I just kind of looked at it like it's, I'm going to do it my way because they trust me. And I started my kids off on a program of doing temple and family history work, and they really caught the spirit. And that's one of the things the Lord or the prophet said, that anything you do for anybody on either side of the veil to draw them closer to the temple covenants is gathering sacred Israel. And we took that to heart. And we actually started a contest to see how much temple and family history work my kids can do. And in a 2-year period of time, they did over 20 million names. That's million with an M, million names. We found, it was the coolest thing. We found some apps that, because a lot of our records are in cursive, handwritten, and computers can't read cursive because it's subjective, right? It's not an A. It could be an A or an A, and so the computer can't tell what that word is. And so they built this app to have people go through and tell the computer what word that is. And so my kids found this app, and we just ran with it. And it would come up on the screen, and there'd be like 12 words, and it would be like the last name Smith. So it'd be like 10 Smiths and then a Smoot and a Smythe. But the computer can't tell the difference. So you just click on the ones that aren't Smith and hit OK. And that releases those names to have work done for them. And so we did that. We went to the temple. We did all kinds of stuff. And we kept track of everything. And they did over 20 million names in 2 years. Right? Now tell me that isn't gathering sacred Israel. And those were high school kids at a public high school that took their own time after class, waiting for the bus, whatever, to do temple and family history work. That's unheard of. But that's what it means to serve a cause greater than yourself. There are millions of people on the other side of the veil that their work is moving forward because some 15-year-old had 10 minutes before band started, and they just did 150 names just sitting there on their phone, right? We don't give the youth of this church enough credit on who they are, and we don't help them understand who they are. And the problem is that after 9/11, everything changed. And the world that we grew up in no longer exists. And so when we treat the youth like we were treated, they shut down. They have no concept or clue of what we're talking about, or what perspective we have, because that doesn't exist in their world. We have to understand who they are and teach them from their perspective and see them from their point of view. And once you do that, once you unlock the power that the youth have, there's nothing that can't be accomplished. So that's the next one. I serve a cause greater than myself. The next one is I'm accountable to God and to my family for my actions. We live in an unaccountable society. No one is being held accountable. Cocaine in the White House. Nobody's being held accountable for anything that they do. Right? And our children see this. This is contrary to God, contrary to the universal laws of cause and effect. And if we don't hold ourselves accountable, then how can we possibly expect our children to? Next one is I blame no one for my faults, and I give thanks for my abilities. We asked to be here. We knew ahead of time what we were going to face, what we were going to go up against. Someone had to sit us down and explain to us in minute detail everything that we were going to face. Or that would have created a legal loophole in the system, and the accuser could come back at the end of days and go, if Meghan had known that she was going to have acne when she was 13 years old, she never would have signed up for this. She does not deserve what she's getting, right? That's a legal loophole that can be created. So you had to know ahead of time. Yeah.
I totally agree.
I was going to have a hard time as a kid, and I knew that ahead of time, right? So don't blame anybody for your faults. Some of us on this earth were so valiant in the pre-existence that there wasn't much we were going to learn on this earth. So we took upon attributes to help other people find Christ-like attributes in themselves. We have people with Down syndrome. We have people with emotional problems. These people made a conscious choice in heaven to accept that, because they saw the grand plan, and they knew, well, my mom or my sister or somebody who I care for isn't going to get it unless they're put in a position to be forced to have Christ-like love, to have mercy, to show forgiveness, right? And so I'm going to take upon that attribute. I'm going to be Christ-like in that way. So it might not be about you. Your ADHD might not be about you. It might be about what you can do for other people. what you're doing to help somebody else find that attribute that we need to have to return to face Christ. The next one is I'm governed by natural law. Laws of the universe, they cannot be changed. Doesn't matter how many executive orders the president writes, he can't change gravity. Can't happen, right? And so these are the laws that we cling to as warriors because they cannot change. They are, as the Declaration of Independence states, they are the laws of nature and of nature's God. They are written and by God, we cannot change them. You know, even in public school, if I have one apple and I get another apple, that's two apples. It's not three, it's not four, it's not subjective, it's not what I feel like that day. It's two apples. That's natural law. And we as warriors have to understand that, have to cling to that. You know, it was natural law that our founding fathers used to create this representative republic, this unheard concept in all of human existence. And once we understood natural law and the concepts of natural law, and we held ourselves like warriors, we went from wind-powered ships to a man walking on the moon in 200 years. Why didn't that happen in any other, in a 1,000-year dynasty of the Roman Empire or the Incas or the Chinese or, the British Empire? None of it didn't happen. Except for the printing press and gunpowder, not much had changed from the time when Nephi came to this world than when Christopher Columbus came to this world. And let me blow your mind, they came over here in the exact same way, in a wind-powered ship. So what was different, right? It's this human freedom that we get from being governed by natural law. And we went from wind-powered ships made of wood to a man walking on the moon in 200 years. Imagine what we could do if we cling to natural law now, right?
I totally believe that. I've always felt that the law came first, and God is God because they are perfectly obedient to the law.
Yep.
The law, the spirit, the truth, the word, same thing. Learn it, do it.
Yeah. The only reason he is God is because he follows the law. And we as intelligence, whether we're microbes or we're sentient beings, recognize him as God because we know he will not violate natural law, right? That's why he's God. Those are his laws. At one time it was considered legal and moral to own a human being. That's not natural law. Those are laws of men. At one time it was considered legal and moral to throw somebody into an oven because they were from a different religion. That's not natural law. At one time it was considered legal and moral to take a deformed baby to the top of the mountain and throw it off because it would have been a burden to the village. That's not natural law. Those are the laws of men. That's why warriors, classically in modern day, have always clung to natural law. And they always focus on natural law because it's an anchor in the storm.
It's the truth.
It doesn't sway with the will of men. It stays the way it is. Okay, the next one in the Warrior's Ethos is my mind is my most powerful weapon. That nothing happens out here unless it happens up here first. And that's why soldiers and cops train, or should be training so much, is so they develop their biggest and most important weapon first. Because you never, and I've learned this the hard way, in a crisis situation, you never rise to the occasion, you fall back on your level of training. And so if you've never prepared yourself, when the crisis comes, you fall back on whatever level of training you have. And if your level of training is blame somebody else, don't take accountability, be offended, whatever, that's what you're going to do. You train yourself to be a warrior and go, we're going to move through this. We're going to move past this. I've been taught how to think, not what to think. And because I've been taught how to think, I'm going to solve this problem using natural law, using logic and reason. I'm not going to get upset, because once I get upset, I lose the high ground. I'm going to work through this problem. This is not an obstacle, it's an opportunity. And whether I need to go through it, under it, over it, or around it, it doesn't matter. This is not going to stop me, because I know who I am, and I know where I came from, and I know who I serve. And this is nothing compared to a guy that can turn a star on and off. This is nothing compared to that. And I answer to him, right? So that's why we need to make sure our mind is our most powerful weapon. The next one is I train to oppose evil in all of its forms: mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual. Those are the four walls of your kingdom. And Satan is going to use a military tactic called probing. What that means is he's going to test your defenses, and he's going to find which wall is the weakest, and that's where he's going to attack. So we need to prepare, be strong physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually for the problems that are coming. or he will find a way. He will find that weakness in your armor, and that's what he's going to exploit. The next one is, I will never quit, retreat, or cower in the face of the enemy. You decide who the enemy is. That's not up for me to decide, because your enemy might be my friend. I'm not afraid of working hard, being outside digging a hole. Some people might be afraid of that. That might be your enemy, right? But you will never quit, retreat, or cower in the face of your enemy, because that gives them power. The most dangerous time in a battle is when the opposing force turns and runs. Because once they turn and run, it becomes a rout. And now the army that's chasing them, they lose logic and reason, and they revert back to their carnal primal state, because now they're in the hunt like a dog chasing a rabbit. And it's hard to control armies like that. And that's when the slaughter begins, is when you see the enemy and you turn and you run. Now the enemy is emboldened to chase after you. And so you stand and fight. And understand that when you stand and fight, you're actually stronger and bigger than the enemy is. Because who do you serve? Who is your king? Who is your general? There are tens of thousands of legions of angels waiting to assist you. He's just one little devil. That's nothing, right? But he sure puts on a good show. That's all it is smoke and mirrors. The scriptures tell us we're going to laugh at him when we realize who this guy really was that we were afraid of. It's going to be insulting. This is the guy? This is the guy? Really? That's what we're going to be saying about this guy, because we don't see it from God's perspective. We don't have that warrior perspective. The next one is, I protect the weak, I assist the elderly, and I care for those in need. That's just being a Christian. The next one, I strive for perfection and ask the same from those who serve with me. We go back to that minimum standard thing. Our kids are being taught that minimum standards are good enough. And that's not. That's actually Satan's plan. We are actually enforcing and encouraging the satanic plan of the takeover of this earth by allowing our children to get participation trophies. They didn't have to do anything. Their team could have lost every game, and they get the same reward as the person that excelled. That is not the laws of nature.
And I want to add that it's not, sorry, really quick.
Yeah.
I want to add that that's also not doctrine.
Yes, that is so counter.
The doctrine is perfection. Perfection through Christ is attainable.
Yes. And minimum standards means you didn't have to work very hard, right? Some minimum standards for people may be higher than others, but that's their minimum standard, and they're going to be judged on that, not on what you do, and you're not going to be judged on what they do. So your minimum standards, you're going to have to stand in front of God and account for the fact that you didn't try harder, that you didn't look at failure as an opportunity to learn, to grow from it. The adversity makes you stronger. Again, I live here in the valley, and we have monsoons, and our trees get ripped out of these because of these hurricane winds all the time. The trees that get ripped out, the roots are really shallow because they weren't forced down deep into the earth from adversity. That's where the water was. If the water's down deep, then the roots go down deep, and the trees are anchored to the ground. And when the winds come, they don't fall over. Same thing with us. It's that adversity that drives our anchor deep into the ground and holds us when the adversity comes. The next one is, I lead by example and have the highest moral standards. It's being that light on the hill, right? If any of your listeners have ever been into a cave before, when you get down in the bottom of the cave, you turn the lights out and it's like soul crushingly dark in there. Well, just imagine one little tiny spark of light coming on and what that does. The darkness is forced away. It cannot occupy the same space. This is natural law. Light and dark cannot occupy the same space. And regardless of how dark it is, light will always overcome the darkness, even one little tiny spark. And that one little tiny spark, every creature of the light is drawn to that little tiny spark. And no matter where you move in that cave, that light is forced, or the darkness is forced away. And then you can take that one little tiny spark of light and you can walk all those people out of darkness. That's because you have the light. And that's what God has asked us to be. That was our commitment to him at baptism, that we would bear his name. We would be his message. We would be the light to this earth. And we can walk these people out of darkness. But you can't do that if you don't have the highest moral standards. And if you don't lead by example, you can't tell somebody else to turn their light on. mean, how does that work? We see that all the time in church and politics, and hey, let's make sure they take care of that. Well, where's the leadership? We're on this earth to lead people out of darkness. There's no place else to run, and there's nobody else coming. This is it. This is the final stand. And he has held in reserve his greatest heroes, his mightiest warriors for this moment in time, to stand as examples and be the light of Christ and have other people drawn to us, and then walk these people out of darkness. That's literally why we're here. That is the only reason why we're here right now, is to do that. Everything else is just icing on the cake. The next one is, the truth is my constant companion. We cannot be afraid of the truth. The truth absolutely does not care about your feelings. It is what it is. It doesn't care who you love. It doesn't care who you voted for. It doesn't care what color your skin is. It doesn't care what your pronouns are. It's the truth. And if you can't speak the truth and comprehend the truth, then how can you hear God talking to you? Because what's his language? The truth, right? So maybe that's why you're not getting your prayers answered, is because he's not even listening to that nonsense. No unclean thing can enter into the kingdom of heaven, including your nonsense talk of, why doesn't anybody love me? Why am I worthless? That's a bunch of nonsense. It's an absolute bunch of nonsense. And he's not even going to entertain responding. And when he does respond, if you don't know what the truth sounds like, how can you hear him? Right? Let me give an example of how far we've fallen from the truth. I can walk into your child's school and I can cuss at them using the name of Christ, but I cannot pray over them using the name of Christ. That's how far we have fallen from the truth. And we are going to pay a giant price, a huge price, for allowing that to be the narrative of our daily life. That we just assume that because we feel a certain way, that must be what the truth is. It's not. It's not. And a warrior clings to the truth because they want to have pure communication between themselves and their peers and with God. They want to speak to God in his language, and they want him to respond in the language that he speaks. It's the truth. The last one is, when the end comes, I will sing my warrior song and go to my reward with honor and dignity. And I love asking this question when I talk to the crowds. I say, who here believes in heaven? I get hands, the afterlife, celestial kingdom, Valhalla, Elysium, Nirvana, whatever it is you believe. You believe that you're going to go someplace great. You're going to get rewarded for your deeds. You're going to see the face of your God. You're going to be on your harp. Your hair is going to grow back. You're going to play your harp. It's going to be awesome, right?
Your heaven sounds great.
Yeah, it's going to be great. My back's not going to hurt anymore. My legs are going to work. It's going to be great. If that's where you're going, then why are you afraid to die? I will submit to you. I will submit to you that it's not a fear of death that you have. It's a fear of failure. You're not afraid to see the face of your God. You're afraid to stand in front of him and be held accountable for what you've done, knowing that you have failed in this life. A warrior, a true warrior, does not fear death because they have not failed in this life. They have simply found another way to succeed. If they fall off that monkey bar, they get right back on. If they come in second place in the race, they try harder and maybe come in first. If they only can come in second and they gave their everything and they're vomiting on their shoes when they cross the finish line and they're absolutely gassed, you did your best. That's all God is asking of you. He's not asking you to win the race. He's saying, do your best. Come back to me and say, look, I gave it everything I had. You gave me one shot at this life. And I promised you before I came down here that I would stand and be not moved. And you said, I'm going to throw the kitchen sink out at you. And you said, go for it. Go for it. I'll show you what I'm capable of doing. Prove me. That's what scriptures say. Prove me now. So that I will come back to you and I will say, I ran the good race. And then you will hear, well done, my good and faithful servant, if you live a life like a warrior. So that's in a nutshell. That's what I talk to people about. That's what I help them understand. And when it comes to preparing for what's happening, it's not going to matter how much wheat you have. It's not going to matter how many scriptures you've memorized. It's not going to matter where you've moved to. If you're not a warrior, the first hard wind that blows, you're going to topple over. Does not matter. All of this stuff can be taken away from you. Trust me. All of this can be taken away from you. And if you're not anchored in the gospel of Jesus Christ, if you're not good with the person in the mirror, with the person upstairs, and with the fact that you're going to have to put some work in, if you're not okay with that, nothing else matters. Nothing else. Now, once you understand that, then yes, make yourself a blessing to other people. Have some food set aside. Understand some basic medical procedures. Realize what the government is doing. Pay attention to what the scriptures say. These are all important things that we have to do once we get to this point that we understand that we're a warrior. But none of that, and I am living proof that it can all be taken away from you. All of it. And then you're left with a choice, right? And that choice is going to be a lot harder if there is no food, because then you start following the whims of men. Hey, these people over here have food. Maybe I should go listen to what they have to say. And that's where we start making poor choices. But none of that's going to matter unless I understand who the person in the mirror is and what my relationship is with God.
Absolutely. Amen. No, I think it's truth from top to bottom. So much doctrine that you just put in military warrior terms, which is fantastic. But you're right. At the end of the day, it's who you are.
Yep.
It's who we are becoming. We have some say in that with our choices. And the Lord is the one who makes the transformation. He's
Right.
the general that takes civilians and turns them into soldiers. And
Right.
I appreciate your life and your testimony, the things that you teach. Thank you for the message you share, and thank you for sharing it with us today.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah. If anybody out there wants me to come and talk to them, I do firesides and podcasts, and this is what I do now. So just reach out to me. And if you think your company needs to hear this, or your school needs to hear this, or your stake needs to hear this, we go into a little bit more detail. I tell some pretty funny stories that tie everything into it. But that's the message of the Warriors Ethos. And it is changing lives. I have entire high schools here in Arizona that have adopted the Warriors Ethos. And it's really kind of cool because they'll say the Pledge of Allegiance, and they'll have their moment of reflection, and then the entire student body will stand up, faculty, staff, and students, and they'll recite verbatim the Warrior Ethos every day. You imagine a high school where there's 3,000 kids that live the principles of the Warriors Ethos, what they're accomplishing. It's incredible to watch. It's incredible. I'm on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and all those fun places. You can find my books on Amazon or Deseret Book. They're available on, some of them are on Audible. Everybody loves them. Matter of fact, just last week, my autobiography went #1 on Amazon.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it was a real surprise to me. I didn't even know. They don't call you and tell you. I was in Texas showing my grandbaby. He said, yeah, look what Papa does. He writes books, and I went, whoa, what is that big #1 right there next to it? And clicked on it. And yeah, it hit #1. So it was.
What's it called?
The autobiography is called Weighed and Measured.
Weighed and Measured. Okay.
Yeah, and I use the biblical reference of being weighed and measured, and found, and that through my life I've been weighed and measured, and hopefully I'm found worthy in God's eyes. So, and then the historical fiction series are called the War Chapters, and it's the war story of the war chapters with Captain Moroni. It's no scriptural stuff. It's the actual war and the things that happen, and it's from a warrior's perspective. So it's really a fascinating, fun story to tell. And there's 3 books in the series. I get into the life of Teancum quite a bit, which was an amazing story to tell. Just understanding from my perspective what it takes to do stuff that he did. And it's just, that's just what normal people don't do. Mm-hmm. You had to have experienced some things in your life to get to the point where you can sneak into an enemy camp and assassinate the king and get away with it. Trust me, that's not just something that a pig farmer can do. And so something led up to that point. So I created this whole fiction around how he grew up and how he became this person and how that converted into working with Moroni and all that stuff. And so it's just really fascinating. And I'm writing the story of the Stripling Warriors now from that perspective, which is going to, cool. It's so much fun to tell.
That'll be story. Really interesting.
Because nobody talks about what happens to them afterwards. I mean, what do you do with a bunch of 14-year-olds that have all been wounded? Are they mortal? Are they immortal? What happens to them? And then how do you teach? How do boys fight guys like me? And it's just a fun, amazing perspective to tell, because not a lot of people have that perspective of the actual war and what it takes to do that stuff. And so I tried to write all that down, and it's been fairly successful.
Awesome. Yeah. I would imagine that would be really cool to read with your kids and all of us individually. I'm sure there's a lot we can learn even
Yeah.
in the fictional telling of that.
And there's some pencil drawings in there. I found an amazing artist to kind of help me tell the story and visualize what these guys look through.
Awesome. Well, everyone check that out. Again, Jason, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you just reading the scriptures, or have you learned to search them? If you haven't switched to using scripture notes, you haven't discovered the power of a tool designed for searching the scriptures. This incredible tool allows you to pull together search results from the standard works, apocryphal texts, and freedom documents into a collection you can study from, digging deeper with instant references to Blue Letter Bible, the LDS Citation Index, Webster's 1828 Dictionary, and more. You can even import your gospel library notes as well. Sign up now for a free trial at scripturenotes.com.